Hey, what's up? I'm Basil Barrington. Thank you for checking out another episode of the Behind the Groove podcast. Today we have a conversation with Jay from Just Techniques. Just Techniques is a YouTube channel. It's also a repair shop. And just by the name, he repairs Techniques 1200s. He brings them back to life. So without further ado, let's check it out.
In terms of business, I'm actually busier. Probably the most
really?
busiest I think I've ever been, I think.
Wow.
Because every bedroom DJ, as you can imagine, they're all now taking the time out of home to build their little studio setups, to get the things done that they wouldn't normally be doing because they're not at work at the moment.
Exactly.
So I'm receiving call after email after Facebook message from people, all wanting to book in, and I can't book them in. I'm fully booked up now until the third week of October.
Wow. So are you just repairing Techniques or other sort of turntables as well?
Just Technics. Literally, that's why I'm called Just Technics.
Well, let's jump into this, man. So I'm here with Jay from Just Techniques. How are you?
All good, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm very good. Can't complain. So listen, Jay, give us a little background about who you are, what you do, just in case, some users or, viewers may not know exactly who you are.
Yeah, of course. So obviously my name's Jay, for a company called Just Technics. I'm located in the UK, in Colchester and Essex, for those that are in Britain. I specialise in the repair, servicing and custom modification works of Technics turntables, hence the business name Just Technics. That's all I touch. I've been doing it for many years now, and yeah, going very, very, very strong.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. How long has, just in case, just give some background, how long has the Technique 1200 been around?
Cool. 1979, I think, is the earliest, because you had the SL120, which was the rotary pot version, so the speed control on a 120, or SL1200, some people used to call them that as well, was a rotary pot on a 33 and a 45. So there wasn't a pitch slider on the original. It was all done by rotary. And then they started to slowly change the design, and then you have now what you have on every single turntable up until present day, which is the legendary pitch slider.
Right. So I guess the Technique, I used to own a pair of the 1500s. That came after the 1200s, I would imagine.
I think that was before. They were very, very strange with their model numbers, because the 1200 Mark II is the deck that changed everything.
Right.
Because obviously you have the silver 1200, you've got the black 1210. Two different variations, exactly the same turntable. But the 15, I'm pretty sure that would have been beforehand, unless it was a hi-fi only based turntable, which, again, the 1200 and the 120, they were never designed for DJ use. They were designed purely for audiophiles, for people that would play on a hi-fi, just to play records. And it was only because of the pitch control slider that DJ started to go, hang on a minute, this is really good, and it's more accurate. You get more of a hands-on tactile feel for using it with mixing. And it all went from there.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So how did you start repairing Techniques? I mean, are you an engineer? Do you have an educational background in that? How does that work?
Right, this is total truth. I am completely self-taught in everything that I do when it comes to Technics.
Wow.
Have been since day one. I used to work for a very well-known DJ company here in the UK. I was there for a number of years, on and off, doing all different things. I did everything from them with YouTube videos to social media, looking after the Facebook page, going to trade shows, going to conference things, testing out new equipment, repair work as well. I did actually do some repair work in their service department too. But the general part that I never used to do there was touch Technics turntables. As far as they were concerned, if they used to buy in equipment, or if we used to buy second-hand equipment, or even sell new equipment, it doesn't have to be touched. Technics were pretty much bomb-proof. You could literally get a turntable, throw it up against the wall, and 9 times out of 10, you could pretty much guarantee that you could plug the turntable into a power and turn it on. It's going to spin around. You could jump on the top, it'll still spin around. So in terms of repair work, everything I've done is self-taught. I've been doing what I do here probably the best part of 10 years, just with Technics. I've been DJing for just over 20 years now as well. I purely, really only play vinyl now, unless I go to a venue that only has CDJs, which the majority of places do. But yeah, I'm strictly vinyl, and Technics has been my passion for the last 20 years. So it just felt fitting to, put my passion into something that I do for a living. So 10 years doing this for you.
Wow. So because the Technique brand is such an old, well, at least the MK2s anyway, they're such an old turntable, where are you getting the parts to repair these Techniques?
Right, okay. Now, they officially discontinued the Technics 1210 and 1200 range, no matter any model. They stopped making them in about 2010. So up until that point, things were very easy to get hold of. Pitch controls, tone arm accessories, internal wiring, components. You could get them direct from Panasonic, from different retailers, etc., and other suppliers here in the UK and all around the world. And some people still have them in stock, which is great. But as you're absolutely right, every single month, something gets discontinued permanently, because just because someone stops making something doesn't mean they automatically just say, we're not looking after this anymore, Because, you couldn't go out and buy a brand new computer, for an example. Brand new, cost you £3,000, brand spanking new gaming PC. You buy it, and then all of a sudden, parts get discontinued and you can't buy anything anymore. They've got to have a set time to look after that person for buying the equipment. Otherwise, it's not fair on the consumer who buys the item. So it was very similar like that with what they did with Technics. So Panasonic discontinued the model, still had a lot of equipment there, all components available. And basically, every time they started running out of the volumes of stock, they just go, right, that item's been discontinued. This item's been discontinued. And then slowly but surely, the list is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And parts are very hard to find now. So things like pitch controls, for an example, the actual slider units themselves, they've obviously been discontinued. You cannot get them anywhere. You may be able to import them from abroad, but in the UK, as it stands at the moment, you can't get genuine pitch control slider units made by Alps anywhere. So they have to be remanufactured. So there's a few people in the UK now that have remanufactured the unit. So we've got continuous supply. They're never going to go anywhere. And if we do run out, we can order more. So things like that. PCBs, where the components actually mount onto, so where the pitch slider unit will mount onto, that's readily available. I mean, I've actually got parts myself that I've also had mass produced, including power supplies, 33 and 45 start and stop assemblies, the pitch control unit, where you attach your RCA cables to, where they solder onto, cables, etc. The majority of parts to keep the turntables going, like you say, how do you keep them going? So the only main concerns with these decks is the two main chips on the board, which they're the heart of the turntable on the main board themselves, which you've got the ICs for the motor and for the pitch control. Now, as it stands at the moment, you still can get them, and they have been reproduced by various different people abroad. So you can buy it from, say, China, for an example. You could go online now. You might pay a bit of a premium to get a batch of them, because you need to buy a few to obviously to get them here, because you don't want to be waiting another 60 days for something to turn up if you get somebody else's turntable that goes wrong. So as it stands at the moment, we're okay. Things like resistors, Zener diodes, capacitors, transistors, these are all things which are readily available in any hardware shop, any electronics store. So as long as you, obviously me being me, as long as I can read a schematic, and as you can imagine, I know these turntables like the back of my hand now from doing this. So I know if something goes wrong, I can take a look at the turntable. There are certain things which you know roughly where the problem's going to be revolved around. So you've got things like the runway speed error. So basically, you turn the turntable on, and all of a sudden it starts to spin around by itself, and it won't slow down. Things like that, there are certain components which will be causing that issue, and 9 times out of 10, it's pretty straightforward to do, and it won't actually cost the customer a lot of money to repair either. But then you've got other problems which are all sort of related to each other. Sometimes they'll be mixed, sometimes they won't, and this is part of the fun of obviously knowing how to troubleshoot and problem solve. So like coming back to what you were saying, parts have been reproduced, so you can get them quite readily. Certain items haven't internally, and it does make things a little bit harder when problems do rise. But in general, as long as you've got a good condition pair of Technics, if you said to me you wanted to have them serviced, you've looked after them, you know, you've never gigged them. Even if you have gigged them, you've looked after them, you've regularly cleaned them, you know, just treated them like your babies, basically. You know, there's a good chance that when they get to me and I open them up, that there's not much in there that really will need to be changed. So you're not going to be looking at a big surprise bill, for an example, of things that you need to pay on top of your service costs.
Right.
It's when you get people that they don't want to spend a lot of money, they'll send you something and they'll go, I want it working. And I'm like, okay, but it's going to cost you X amount. And they're not prepared for this. But generally, parts are available to get. You won't have any nasty surprises as long as you look after your turntables. That's what I usually find with these turntables in general, especially the Mark IIs.
So basically, you're not repairing a Technique not unless you're using original Technique parts, Panasonic parts.
Right. Now, this varies. The way that I put this is quite simple. Panasonic put particular parts, like with the Mark V, for an example. There are set resistors on a Mark V which cause nasty problems with the pitch control drifting, for an example. You also get it where the pitch will stutter or stammer. So if you imagine you look at the strobe dots, I'm going around on the turntable, they should be still when they're set at certain points on a pitch control slider unit. With some of them, if you look at them, you'll notice they jump very fast in different positions on a pitch. Now, on a Mark V, it's very, very common that issue occurs. Now, what you'll find is with some of the older versions of the Technics turntables, they actually have components within them which will last longer than what the newer components will last. So it goes both ways.
Really? That sounds kind of backwards.
It does, but the thing is, the way that I put this, when people say to me, do you use genuine Panasonic components within your turntables? It's a straight answer, yes and no. Because if Panasonic have put components in their newer turntables, which don't last as long as the old components, then surely the best thing to do is to do your homework and find out which components from those older units they're using. Find replicated units, find high quality versions of that unit that are aftermarket that you know are going to be better and last a lot longer than what you're using in the new one. And that way you know you're going to get further longevity out of your unit than you would be if you just keep the same components in. Because the reality is, if you have that problem with the pitch, like I was just saying, if you had that problem and you gave me your turntable and I replaced the component that's causing the problem with the same component that Panasonic have put on that board, you'll probably get the same lifespan if you had the product from new as you would have had. So you'll have that again. So the likelihood is you probably get another 10 years, 5 to 10 years worth of use out of that little component that causes the problem. But there's never any guarantees. So it's nice peace of mind knowing that if you put aftermarket components within inside the unit that are built to last and are of better specification, no matter what it is, it's nice knowing it's going to last. And for further peace of mind, any deck that comes into me for servicing, any component on that board that is causing a problem like that, I change for aftermarket because you want it to work and you want it to last.
Wow. So were all of the Technique 1200s analog 100% up to, I don't know, like I'm quite sure like obviously some of the newer Technique 1200s are not 100% analog. I mean, I noticed you always speak about the iconic. I noticed you always speak about the iconic MK2, you know?
Right.
So are there any, like, do you think that there will ever be a 100% analog turntable? No,
I really don't. I think the reason I go on about the Mark II, this is the truth of it. So if you took apart a Mark II, an MK3D that you've obviously got over where you are, an MK3D, or the MK3, MK4, MK5, or the M3D, all of these turntables inside look identical. you wouldn't really notice any difference apart from a little couple of things like the brake, where you can adjust the brake so you can turn it and it starts and reverses back quicker. So the boards themselves and the majority of the components themselves, just on the main board alone, are practically the same as each other. There are slight variances with them, but they are the same. Now, when people say to me about why I say the analog is basically better than the digital, it's better in terms of precision. So obviously anybody that is used to using turntables for long transitions, like take myself for an example. I mean, I mix trance, the old 90s trance, hard dance, techno, and I scratch as well. So we're doing this for a long time. And I want something that I can use, that the minute I adjust the pitch, I know it's going to stay there for at least 60 seconds until I have to move it a little bit again to keep it back. Right. That's the beauty of using the analog turntable, as we all know. We appreciate Technics. Yeah. Now, with digitally controlled pitch sliders on any of these turntables that you see, like with handpin we were talking about before an email, everything like that, they all work in digital steps. So if you imagine, I'll tell you, give me a second. Can you actually see me on here? Can you see my camera?
Yeah, I can see your camera.
Okay, give me a second, I'll show you.
All right.
So I'll quickly show you this. This is a pitch control slider. I'll see if I can just see a little square in the bottom. So yeah, this is a pitch slider from a new old stock Mark II. This is from one of my turntables. I own a brand new old stock pair. So if you imagine this is obviously the housing unit itself. So if you say, for example, you're playing down here, so you're playing about +2, yeah? And you just want to slightly speed your record up because you can hear it's just a little bit too slow. And you want to just give it a little bit of a push to keep it in line. And all you do is just move it a fraction, wouldn't you? And that would just be about enough to keep it where it is for another 50, 60 seconds, sometimes longer, depending on the condition of your slider. Well, the problem that you've got with these digitally controlled pitch slider units in these modern turntables, it's because when you move the slider, if you say, for example, you were where we were a second ago and you want to just give it a little bit of a push, you're not doing this like you think you are. Right. What you're actually doing is moving it in blocks, basically. If you imagine lots of little blocks all across the slider, you're not moving it for these little fractions, you're moving it within a block. So that little movement you're doing there may be in a little movement in the same block, so it's not actually doing anything when you move. Okay. There's a certain degree of resistance to where you go. So you may be thinking you're moving it a little bit, but you'll find you're moving it too much. So what you tend to see is a lot of even big DJs online, when you see them on YouTube or streams, when they play on modern turntables, you tend to find that their hand is glued permanently to the pitch control slider. Yeah. Because they have to, because they cannot get it perfect. So what you probably feel exactly the same, and I say this to everybody. Yeah. And what you tend to find as well, you'll have them glued to this, and they'll have their other hand glued to their mixer. Because they know the minute that channel fade is going to be open, they have to work on their mix. Right. It's just the only way around it. So analog turntables, do I think they're going to be releasing any more? Now, I said this before because you must have seen my videos about the Mark VII, my review videos on that. And a lot of people ask me the same question. And I always say the same thing. I don't think they will. It's quite simple, because if they were going to do that, the truth be told, they would have done that by now. Right. Because it's more expensive. This is the main reason why I feel they will not do this. What they should have done is they should have brought a limited run out of 1200s and 1210s. And what I've said to people, this is my honest opinion, I've said to people they should have brought out 1200 physical units of the SL1200 and 1210 physical units of the SL1210. So you have the 1210 and the 1200, right? And do a special one-off version using new components or the new style housing from like the Mark VII, the GR, but have the original board or new and improved board from like the Mark II up to the Mark V with the original analog slider. If they had have done that, and they have advertised that towards DJs and said, this is exactly what you want, you know, this is a one-off, we're doing this, I think they would have sold them straight away like that. And I probably would have got my credit card out and bought two as well, because I know
Probably would have been $2,000 a piece too.
Well, it probably would have been. I mean,
Right.
this is the problem, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the price of like the Mark 7, for an example, I mean, you're looking what? I mean, over here it's 800. I think it's £800, 900 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's 799. I think I paid,
Mhm.
and the quality in general, when you compare this against the original models, there's no comparison. The older version is much more and further superior than the Mark 7 ever will be. And you can see that they've spent less money in terms to make the unit, to produce the unit, in terms of the quality, even the feel, and how light the unit is as well. You can pick it up with your little finger. It's that light.
Yeah, I
So
saw
you
that.
you wouldn't want to use it in a club. You really wouldn't. And people that I know have used them in clubs have really struggled. I mean, they're nice turntables to use, and they feel quite nice to mix on, but they don't hold as well. It's a bit like the M5G, for an example. The M5G turntable is a nice looking turntable. It's probably the nicest looking Technics out of all of them. But to use, it's horrible. It's just the pitch control. It's digitally controlled. Now, when you say about the analog on these older Technics turntables, people don't quite understand that in all of these modern turntables, whether you buy Pioneer, Denon, anything, Audio Technica, Stanton, Reloop, they're all the same. They're all analog sliders. The actual slider unit themselves is analog. It's the way that the slider is controlled. Yeah. So one of the most #1 things I get on an email, I get this every week, I get from customers all over the world. They all say to me, Jay, can you put an analog slider inside my Pioneer? Can you put it in my Reloop? Can you put it in my Stanton Straight 150? Okay. And I just reply and say, no, because you already have an analog slider. Right. But then trying to let people understand how it works, it's very, very difficult. But it will never happen. Unfortunately, I think if Panasonic Technics were going to have done to do it, they would have done it by now. And I think they've actually missed the boat. There are much nicer turntables out there on the market, and this is coming from somebody that I love Technics. I mean, as you can imagine, I do it for a living. It's my passion. I love Technics, but people say to me, "Would you recommend the Mark 7?" Because of my experience with Panasonic, with what's happened, with the feedback that I received from my customers and my feedback from the service centre. Well, I won't get into any of that, but I wasn't very impressed. I would not recommend the Mark 7 to a DJ unless you're scratching. And to be honest, there are much nicer turntables out there than the Mark 7 that do more for less money. So that for the price of 2 Mark 7s, you could buy 4 turntables from another supplier. Right. And that it just makes more sense to go with your budget. It just seems that everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon because it's got the name Technics on it. Technics and 1210. It's, you know, people are going to instantly think, oh, wow, they brought a new turntable out. Then they see the price and think, that's a lot of money. Then you think, well, hang on a minute, it's going to be a lot of money, but you're getting a lot for your money. It's going to be the best quality, the best this, the best that, which isn't always the way. And they really have missed the gun with it. Really have, unfortunately.